All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. One of the things about this show that I think people know, if you've been listening for a while or even for a little bit, is that the focus is musicians. I talk to people who play every genre of music, from death metal to country to hip hop to jazz to classical to whatever. And I usually don't stray too far from the music thing, but obviously Winnipeg is a city that has a lot of live entertainment of all kinds going on, from theater to music, of course, uh, to comedy. And so the guest on this episode today is someone who fits in that last category. And I know it's kind of fudging the theme of the show a little bit, but it's my show, and I can kind of choose what I want to do. So deal with it. And my guest has an album coming out, so this fits with the general sort of theme of the show anyway. Even though it's not music, so I think the best way to start this off is if you want to introduce yourself, give a bit of background about what you do, especially seeing as this is a bit different than what I usually cover on the show.
Sure. My name's Jared Story, and I'm a stand-up comedian from here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I'm happy to fudge your theme, man.
Awesome. And so, I mean, stand-up comedy. It seems like it seems consistently growing in Winnipeg. I don't know if that's just my
Yeah,
perception as an outsider. I mean, I often feel very disconnected from the stand-up scene. I see all the posters about
sure.
it. I see, especially venues like the Park Theater, often putting on shows. I know
Hmm.
you do an annual show that it seems to be getting a lot of buzz every year, or
Yeah,
maybe it's more than annual. I'm not even sure. But I've always felt, and I don't want to start off on like a downer, but my kind of relationship with the stand-up comedy scene is I always feel very uncomfortable about the idea of seeing a bad amateur comic. And with
yeah,
an amateur band, I can listen to a band playing out of tune, for an hour straight
sure.
and completely atonal and horrible, because I think it's because I get it. Like I've been there, I've been in that band. Whereas
Right.
comedy to me, it seems so much more. I feel more embarrassed for the person on stage than I would in a band situation because I don't know why, but so I've
I
often
get that.
avoided it. Does that make
I,
sense?
I totally get that. It is more embarrassing. It's just them. It's just them. They don't have anybody to really share that embarrassment with when it's not going well.
That's
So,
right. Yeah, yeah. So I think that that's kind of one of the reasons I haven't gone out to see as much local stand up.
mhm,
I love that it exists, and I'm
mhm.
definitely, like I said, I see a lot of it happening, and see people are really into it. But I've avoided, I think, for that reason, that I just feel like, what happens if it's bad? Where do I hide? As an
Yeah.
audience member. So what can you just maybe give like a quick sort of overview of what the stand up scene is like here?
Well, I think like the current stand-up scene kind of started probably about 2009 or so. Uh, some guys who were around the same age started doing shows at like comedy at the Cavern on Sunday
Okay.
nights at the Cavern, and Thursdays at the Handsome Daughter, or previous name had a different name at the time.
Yeah, yeah. It had a bunch of
Yeah,
names.
and yeah, and so we all, all of us kind of around the same age, and we all kind of started together, and lots of kind of, I guess, a healthy slash unhealthy competition going on. But I think a lot of those guys now are the ones that they're putting on the shows now. You got Benji Rothman putting on shows at the Basement, which is this newer comedy venue on the west side of the city.
Okay.
And these are the people that are hosting at Rumors now. They're hosting at Yuck Yucks, so they're doing the shows around town. I feel like that was kind of but you can kind of trace it all back to like John B. Duff yelling at us at the Cavern in 2009. So
Right, right. So yeah, I guess like it seemed very much, and John B. Duff actually was many years ago. I did an
yeah,
episode about an event that was happening at the Park Theater, and he was there. And I mean,
yeah.
when he passed, it seemed like it was a big deal for the comedy scene. Like that seemed like a guy who was super influential to a lot of you.
Yeah, he was a big deal for us. He was just I mean, he was older than most of us.
Yeah,
So all of a sudden he's kind of our comedy godfather. But he ran the show at the Cavern. He ran it really tight, and
yeah,
he was like he wanted you to get better. So if you were kind of slacking off, if you weren't writing new jokes, if you weren't, trying to get better, he would let you know.
right.
And some people that scared off a lot of people, which is good because
I bet it is. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it was a great kind of quality control device that we had here in the stand-up scene. And so yeah, he was a very influential figure here in local comedy. Yeah.
Well, I think when seeing all the tributes to him, around that time, it kind of struck me that this scene is very much like the DIY punk scene
Yeah,
Basically in the senses you just explained, people are trying to like make each other do better, and there is the ones who aren't any good are going to kind of maybe fade away, but everyone else is
sure.
kind of pulling each other up, and they're doing it on their own
Yeah,
because there's not really an ecosystem for anyone doing it sort of at a bigger level.
sure.
But just to, I mean, get away from the scene itself. You've been doing this for a long time. I mean, I've seen your
Yeah,
name showing up on posters and things for comedy shows for years and years now, and you have your first album. So
yeah.
what is? I mean, is that common as a comedian to be putting out an album this far into your career? Because I feel
Well,
like you don't see them as much as you see musicians releasing albums for obvious reasons, I guess.
right. Yeah, I think well, it took me a while to do my first album, that's for sure. I think the album itself is not really how people are accessing comedy these days, but I
For sure.
really wanted to, have some sort of proof that I was pretty good at this, that I can show somebody, when I'm an old man. But but also there are opportunities to get played as a comedian with audio recordings.
Yeah,
Like SiriusXM does have a comedy channel, so and comedians that get spun on that channel do stand to make a decent amount of cash doing it. So that's I think one of the main reasons why you'll see Canadian comics putting out albums is so just to try to get on there. But mostly I just made it because I wanted to have an album. I'm a huge fan of rock and roll and heavy metal and I used to work as you did too. I know I used to write for Uptown
that's right. Yeah,
and review music and go to music and see bands and stuff. So I was always I have no musical talent, but I I wanted to be them, and this is the closest I can get. Is I can make jokes and I can put that on an album. So
yeah.
yeah,
So
that's why I wanted to do it.
I mean, obviously with a comedy album, they're I mean, as far as I know, anyway, they're mostly recorded live. This is recorded live.
Yeah.
How do you decide? I mean, did you plan well ahead of time this was going to be the show that you recorded, or is this something that you just record everything and sort of hope for the best and then sort of choose the ones that work best? Like,
No.
I guess maybe a better way of approaching that is there extra pressure on the idea of like this is going to be recorded? This is the
Yes.
version of this joke that's going to be sort of the enduring one.
Yeah, there was extra pressure. I had planned for it to be that night. It also happened to be my birthday that night, so I was like, okay, this seems like a good reason to do this. I'll book the Park Theater. I've been doing shows at the Park Theater for 10 years, but I
Yeah,
thought this time I'm going to make it all about myself, and do it. Yeah, there was extra pressure, but luckily having been performing in that room for so long, I kind of knew what to expect. For me,
sure.
it's very like room-based comedy. Like if you've been in a room for a while, you kind of know how it works and you feel comfortable. So I felt fairly comfortable leading up. Well, right before the show.
Right, of course, yeah, yeah, yeah,
When I
yeah.
was thinking about the show for weeks before that, I was definitely a bit of a basket case, but I knew I had the material. I've been, some of the material is a decade old and or it's been changed here and there,
Yeah.
and some of it was stuff that I wrote just leading up to the event. So
Well,
yeah,
I do want to talk about the material, but just before we get into that, I mean, the Park Theater is a big venue.
hmm,
It's a bit, especially now that they've renovated, it's a huge room.
yeah,
And listening to listening to the album, it has a very kind of intimate sort of feel to it.
right,
How do you record that in that room? I mean, obviously you had people there that helps, and
yeah,
the crowd, contributes to the whole vibe of the comedy album. But
sure.
it's such a huge room. Like, how did you get it? What was the process of recording just spoken word basically in that room and getting the crowd reaction too?
Yeah, honestly, it was just, I mean, I guess I got a little lucky, I think. It was just my crowd mic plus, sorry, my mic plus
Yeah.
two crowd mics over top of the audience. And then I gave it to Cam Lewepke,
Okay.
and he mixed it, and he did a fantastic job of mixing it. And yeah, I think it sounds really great. Like I
It
wasn't
does
sure
sound
what
good.
to
Yeah.
expect. Yeah, because I wasn't sure what to expect because like the smart choice for somebody at my level would have been to do it in a smaller room where you get the laughs are bouncing off the walls and but I thought, you know what, I got this hook up at the park and I know I can get the venue. Now I just
Yeah.
gotta convince a bunch of people to come. That was the hard part, was to try to get everybody out, which I managed to do.
That's
But yeah, sound wise, it was pretty straightforward. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, because I've never really considered that before. I mean, you listen to a comedy album or listen to comedy on the radio, wherever it is, the laughs are there, right? They're very
Yeah.
present, always. And sometimes you hear some famous comedian, you know, they're in an arena or something, and that's a
Yeah.
totally different vibe. But yeah, you've managed to. The mics obviously worked because you
They
got a
worked.
very.
They worked.
It sounds close. It sounds like the crowd is right there with you, like right in front of you. And I know the
Yeah.
park has, it has a little bit of a distance from stage to audience,
Right.
just because of the size of it.
Yeah, it was just one of those nights too where everything seemed to be clicking. Like I didn't feel I was kind of having a little bit of an out of body experience while I was up there. Just I think because I knew what I was doing so well.
Yeah.
I had rehearsed and practiced and ran these jokes so much leading up to it that it just kind of all worked out. And yeah, and I thought that I mean that the mics captured it, and I thought Cam really did a good job of, because when I got the raw tracks back, I was like, okay, I guess I could try mixing this. And then I immediately was like, no, I got to get someone who knows what they're doing. And then he made it sound so good. So
Well, it's interesting because it seems like it should be easy, right? With just vocals and laughing. But yeah, obviously, someone who
there's
knows what they're
a,
doing with it's going to make a big difference.
and that's why I went to him, because I knew he knew what he was doing. And yeah, I mean, if the laughter's too high, if I'm too low on the mix, I knew he would give me a pretty tasteful mix, and he
Yeah,
did.
yeah, it sounds great. So, you mentioned a few minutes ago that the material, some of this is quite old. You've been doing it for years. Again, I'm going to compare this to bands because that's sort of my comfort zone. But
Sure.
if you're in a band, you make a record, you're expected to play those songs. People want to hear those songs again. They want to hear them again and again.
Yeah.
And depending how successful the record is, you might be playing those songs the rest of your life,
Hmm.
the rest of your career. Comedy seems different. I don't know if it is, but it seems like are these jokes dead now? Now that you've recorded them and now that they're like, can you get away with performing them again?
I can. I think I can. I try not
Yeah,
to do them all the time, but there's still like, you know, sure, I got 150 friends or whatever out to the park that night, but when I'm doing shows around town, I'm still running into tons of people that I've never done jokes to, and maybe there's a
right.
couple people out in the audience that have heard them, but they're gonna have to live with that. um, yeah, it took a long time to get that material, so I'm still holding on to some of it, and I'm working on getting some new jokes in there, and I hope that, and you kind of have to like give yourself that challenge too, right? Like you
Right.
have to be like, tonight I'm just doing new stuff, or I'm gonna make half of my act tonight new, because you don't want to be that person who's just doing the same hour for their whole career. So I'm
But I
still
guess
writing.
there's not demand for that, right? Like, people don't want to hear that, or do they? Like, is there demand for comedy fans to hear kind of the hits like mixed in with
I
the
think it's weird
the
that
stuff?
I think there kind of is. Like I remember being at a Brian Regan show, and Brian Regan?
I know the name. Yeah, I don't think I've heard any of his
Great,
stuff.
great stand-up comedian. I think that everybody would love this guy. Very clean, but you could show him to your grandma, she'd laugh. You could show him to your little nephew, he'd laugh. Like he's
Right.
just all around a great comedian. But he's got some famous bits, and at the end, he lets the crowd, yell out what their favorite bit is, and they're all like, "Do the me monster!" And you know what? He did it, and they laughed at it. I think that it's sometimes when you're like, sometimes if they can tell you're not having fun saying that same old joke,
Right.
that's when you've lost them. But if the crowd wants it, that's a different story.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Oh, and I
Yeah.
imagine there's a lot more pressure on that whole idea of you enjoying it too, right? Because if you're
Yeah.
obviously bored, it's gonna suck the fun right out of the room.
It takes everything out of the room. They just need to know that you're having a good time. It took me
Yeah.
a long time to figure that out.
Well, I think that again, like I'm not a comedy connoisseur. I like jokes.
Hmm.
I'll watch stand
Sure.
up. I watch comedy films, whatever. I've listened to some comedy albums over the years too. But I find that I laugh the most when the person on stage is like losing their shit laughing. Like when someone
Yeah.
says something funny and it's obviously funny to them too, to the point where they're doubled over and like
Yeah.
need to take a minute before they get back on the mic. Like
Sure.
that's always kind of seems like they are actually enjoying it rather than just going through the paces, right?
Yeah, they're in it. Like they're in their act, they have
Yeah,
to be present in it, or it just seems like a person that is just reciting something.
It's like a
And
poetry
then
reading with no rhyming.
yeah, and then the contrary to, I mean, the other side of that, there's people that don't seem to write at all, and they don't seem to have a structure at all, and sometimes that can be detrimental too. Like they don't know where they're going to go next.
Right.
I'm very written. Like I am very written. I don't know, but then I try to hide that with little tricks.
Right. Right. Well,
So,
are like now that this is recorded, you have this it's on tape.
mhm,
People are going to hear it for however long they decide to listen to you.
mhm.
Um, what how long does it take you from this point to sort of develop a completely different set? I mean, whether you use some of the same jokes again in the future,
Sure.
but what's the turnover time for you kind of the next act that you
Well,
put
it took
together?
me 15 years to get that hour, so I don't know. It'll probably be quicker. I have a little bit more of an idea what I'm doing now, but I wanted to get those jokes down that I have. Well, I've already started like I think I have like since then I think I have maybe 10 new minutes that
Okay,
I could conceivably put on an album that I think are good enough to put to tape. But it takes a long time. It takes a long time. You got to work those bits, and you're always finding new stuff within them. And
yeah.
it's
How do
not
you
for
know?
me. It's not fast. Yeah.
What is the like? At what point do you sort of realize this joke is complete in its current format? Like, does that ever happen, or
No,
it
I don't
must?
think
No,
so because I'm still writing tags on things that are on the album.
right,
Like I've and probably that's maybe to keep myself interested in. Like I know I got this hot bit that I recorded, but if I'm going to keep doing that bit, I'm going to have to give it something for myself to kind of feel new doing it.
right,
And so yeah, I've still developed some of those bits a little bit further, or at least some of the ideas of those bits. So like maybe I'll do that bit, but then I have a whole second part now that's a different thing. So I'm jumping off a little bit from those things because I can't think of any news like material that's like, what am I supposed to talk about?
right.
Being bald, being from the country, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's only so far you can take those jokes, right?
Yeah.
So what where do you see the comedy community in Winnipeg going? Like, is it continuing to grow? It seems like it is from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah, I think right now it's definitely the best time for more established comedians in town. You got rumors, you got yuck
Right.
yucks now, you got the basement, you got there's the don't tell comedy shows that have been happening, these secret comedy shows. You got more like booked stuff. I don't think and this is not me trying to be too critical, but I don't think our open mic scene is as strong as it used to be.
Okay.
Um, so I think that's one thing that we're lacking in this town is a place to try new jokes. Yeah, I'm actually working on that. I'm trying to think of maybe starting a night where established comedians are trying new jokes because you don't want
Okay.
to try brand new stuff when you're at the club and you're being paid or you're out doing a corporate event. Like you're not going to just whip out, what about this?
And then it
You
just
need,
bombs, and yeah, yeah, yeah,
and then it just bombs. And you need that proving ground. You need that place where it's like, this is for trying new stuff out.
yeah,
So I've been kind of missing that a bit, but it goes in waves and you know, some bar closes and another one opens or whatever. So
yeah.
I'm
Is
not too
there
worried.
is there much of a like what opportunities are out there for people who are getting started in this? Like, is open mics, is that sort of the place?
Yeah, that's
For
the
someone
place
to,
to go. Like anytime anybody asks, like, how did you do this? I'll just like, well, I slugged it out in open mics and I still do.
yeah,
Um, and you have to, and you go pretty much every chance you can. Like it's something you have to you have to learn how to be comfortable on stage. You have to learn how to not do well too. Like you have to learn how to kind of let it flow over you a bit. So a lot of people try it once and they quit, or they don't try it at all because they don't understand why they can't just get to where you are. And you're like, well, this is the only way. You have to fail a bunch of times.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's actually fascinating you say that because I think a lot of artistic creative pursuits are the same way. I mean,
Sure.
podcasting, like I've been doing this for this. I think this will be the 900th episode actually, which is kind of cool.
Woo.
But like that's a long time for doing this. But
Yeah.
there's so many people who start out and they think that they're going to get they see podcasters making money, like famous
Hmm.
comedians or whoever doing shows, and they're like, "Oh, I can do that. I can talk about bullshit in the basement with my friends." And they do 3 episodes and they get sick of it because it hasn't worked yet, right?
It hasn't
And
worked, yeah.
and it might
It's
not
not
work.
that fast.
Right, it might not work for 20 years. It might not work ever, but like there's,
Right.
I think that that's sort of the natural sort of culling of people who aren't serious about it or aren't going to put in
Exactly.
the effort. And I imagine it's very similar for comedy.
It's very similar for comedy. If you don't like, you have to put in those. It's like, the whole 10,000 hours thing.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
have to do it. It's the only way to do it. If you don't do it, like if you find a way to like you notice a lot with sometimes when there's like a kind of a somebody who's blew up because TikTok and Instagram, you can blow up with a reel, you can
yeah,
blow
of
up
course.
with your TikTok and unless those comedians were comedians before, this all went down, they're just kind of utilizing this new thing. If they were just got big off of that, you notice it when they come to your town and they do comedy. They're not seasoned.
Right.
They
They
haven't
have the
went
one
through
joke.
all the
Yeah,
yeah, and they haven't bombed enough, and they haven't. And you really notice it. But comedians, I'm not saying you shouldn't use those things because they can be really beneficial, especially if you were a good comic already.
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's how most people I think who are outside of the core comedy fans see stand up. I mean, I definitely
Yeah.
see more stand up just flipping through Instagram or whatever than I actually pursue on my own. Right.
Yeah. It is weird though, like the kind of comedy that's getting big because I think it started because a lot of comics just they didn't want to burn their jokes, right? So they started
Sure.
putting up crowd work. That's when, for your audience, like just when the comedian talks to the crowd. And that became the video that you see all the time now for
Definitely.
comedians. And that changes the crowd. That changes what they think a comedy show is. So I haven't really liked that because I mean, I'll do crowd work, but I don't like doing it. Like I'd rather not talk to them.
Right. Right. Yeah, they're there to listen to you, not to. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the way I've always seen it. So I hope that fad kind of goes away a little bit, but yeah, because for me, comedy is it's something I write. It's something that I write pretty much down to the word, and I riff as well. I leave a little bit of some spots for myself to be loose, but you know, since this is a music show, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I'm not the first person to say this, but for me, comedy is music. It's very rhythmic.
Yeah.
I definitely have a rhythm, like a a tempo that I need to kind of lock into, and when I'm in that, that's when I'm at my best. So when something from the crowd, takes me out of that, it can be hard to get back into it.
Sure. I believe that. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
So, how do people hear this? Because I mean, most of the time I have a band on here, and it's all the usual platforms they hear it on, but
Right.
also buy it at a show. Is that a thing with comedy? Like, do you bring a thing of CDs or
I don't
something to
have
it?
physical copies,
Okay.
but
Okay.
yeah, a lot of people have like download cards and stuff like
Sure.
that. I actually haven't made any of those, but yeah, you can hear it on through iTunes and Bandcamp, and that's where you can buy it. And Spotify and all the other streaming services have it. So
Cool.
yeah,
Cool.
good
Would you?
ideas.
I assume that right, right. I assume that Bandcamp is probably the place you'd prefer to send people to, right? Because at least you
Yeah,
get something out of
Bandcamp
that.
or even iTunes. Like, I mean, that's where I make a little bit of money, and it's nice when people buy it. It's
Of
cool.
course,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, this being a podcast, someone could hear it the day it comes out. In which case, this is all fresh. They could hear it 2 years from now. Apparently, I don't stop doing this ever, so I mean, it could be 10 years from now. It could be episode 1800 or something.
Never stop.
Yeah, exactly. Can't stop, won't stop. But how do they? How does someone find out more about what you're doing? As far as upcoming shows. Maybe by the time someone hears this, you could already have a second album out. Who knows, right? What's the best way
Yeah.
to follow your
Uh,
career?
it, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm literally looking up my Instagram handle right now. That's how non-social media-fied I am. I'm at J Rockarolla. That's JROCKAROLLA. I've had that for so long. I don't know. Maybe I should change it. Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram. I just update, what shows I'm on and album stuff
Okay.
and everything else that goes along with it.
Well, and
And
I'll link
yeah,
to the Bandcamp. I'll link to the Bandcamp at least in the show
yeah,
notes too, so people can check it out that way.
sure.
Um, for the people who are listening, sort of when this is fresh, do you have any in the near future any shows coming up that you want to plug?
Well, I think the one it would probably be too late. But I do host, like, so I host and I produce the Winnipeg Comedy Showcase at the
Right.
Park Theater.
Is that,
It's a court. Sorry,
so I was gonna say, is that annually or it's more often
no,
than that, right?
it's like quarterly.
Okay.
So the next one is on May 19th, but you might be hearing it too late. But we have another one in the summer. I'm not sure of the date, but they come up regularly. There'll be one in the fall, one in the winter, and we've been doing that for 10 years
Wow.
now. Yeah, we've had our 10th year anniversary in February, and still going strong. Beyond that, I host at Yucks sometimes. I'll do guest spots at Rumors, and I'm around town. I still go to Mike's and I
Cool.
practice jokes and see if, because you don't know if something's funny, even if you've been doing it for a while and you kind of have an idea of what's funny, you don't really know until they tell you,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they being the audience. So
So how often are you how often are you performing? Like, is it a, I mean, it sounds like you're trying to do it as much as you can. Like in a
yeah.
given month, how many shows do you do?
Um, it just depends. I mean, it depends how lucky I am that month.
Of course, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I do some out of town stuff too. I get on some like kind of corporate, some small town things. But every week I try to get out at least like 2 to 3 times. Um, there's usually I'll have like a book show on the weekend, and then I'll do some mics during the week, trying new stuff, or just working something that I maybe haven't done in a while and I want to do because you forget you gotta get back in that rhythm. Yeah, got some shows coming up, and I just found out today I'm doing some shows in Montreal
Oh,
this
cool,
summer in
cool.
June. So yeah, I'm
That's awesome.
trying to get out there. I feel like I got the chops to be able to do this on a more like consistent basis. I'm just kind of, you know, Winnipeg is a smaller city with less people know about the talent we have here. So trying to break down some doors.
Awesome. Well, hopefully it goes well for you. One thing I was going to ask you, but earlier, and I forgot to mention this was, do you
Sure.
record every show you do? Like, how much of this do you have? Do you like? I just wonder if you have an archive of just
Yeah.
countless hours of comedy you've done, and like that's just sitting in a vault somewhere or something.
I wish because I never recorded anything for like the first 10 years of doing comedy. I had sporadic videos from time
Yeah,
to time. If I did like the rumors contest back in the day, I got some videos of that on like DVDs. And but I didn't really record my stuff as just a general rule, but now I've started recording it more because it is a good way to look at like, oh, what went well, what didn't
yeah.
go well. I never did that before, and everyone always told me to. I still didn't because I was like, I don't want to listen to myself right after. That seems,
It does
but
seem
it
kind of
is good to,
narcissistic, but I get it though. I mean, you sort of have to, right, to hear what worked and what didn't.
yeah. And so sometimes you'll think like, well, that didn't work, and then you'll watch the tape and you realize, oh, these people walked in in during the middle of your joke, and that distracted everybody. It wasn't you. You thought
Yeah,
it was you, but it was it was kind of that. And or it's the opposite. You thought everybody was laughing at you, but they're just laughing at some random thing that happened in the audience.
right.
So it is good to have. I wish I would have taken that more seriously sooner, but it is a good tool.
Cool.
But I still write like mostly like by hand or on my computer. Like I'm very written. Some people, I know they think of things as more like they'll take video and then they'll just kind of work like expand on that. And but I have to get into the words. I think just from years of writing and doing writing as a profession,
Yeah,
that's how I operate.
awesome.